Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us tonight are Riyadh Al Samurai, chief sports feature writer at The Mail, and Jack Rosser, football reporter for The Sun. Evening to you both. Let's quickly run everyone through the back pages, starting with The Guardian, which says in big letters, Ten Hag out, United manager to be sacked even if they win FA Cup today. The Sun, similar themed, red man walking, not backed. Erik knows he's sacked. And McKenna buys epic United return. As for the Mail, Erik on the brink. United boss Ten Hag faces sack even if he wins the FA Cup. The club have already spoken to McKenna and Tuchel about the job. I was right to stick with City, says Kyle Walker. The back of the eye, FA Cup final at Derby with a double-double and a P45 hanging on it. The front of the Times, Ten Hag's final farewell. McKenna waits on United offer. Verstappen, my Red Bull is bouncing like a kangaroo. And the back of the Mirror, out for revenge. Ten Hag looking to end doomed reign with a win he feels United deserved in last year's Cup final. Pep no let up, and a £200 million match that the playoff final leads against Southampton. And finally, the front of the Telegraph, Ten Hag in final reckoning. Right, we are going to start at the back of the Guardian then. Jacob Steinberg, who broke this Ten Hag out story. Riyadh, I mean, you've got to feel sorry for him a little bit, the United manager. He's been beleaguered for some time, but Jacob Steinberg's finally saying he's gone whatever happens in the final.
Yeah, I do. I think most of us would probably feel some level of sympathy because it has very much been the sporting equivalent of a death by 1,000 cuts. And how much can one person take when his future has been picked apart on a sort of a twice weekly basis, it feels, since probably the turn of the year. And we do seem to be moving towards the inevitable conclusion. Some would possibly argue that it's harsh to be in that place prior to an FA Cup final. Well, let's not forget, of course, they could be Manchester City, as improbable as that sounds. But, you know, there's a bigger picture here, and it's decline over a long period of time. We saw him do well in that first season. We saw him win trophy. But it's falling from that level to what we've seen this year. It's been disjointed. There's no obvious pattern of play. I don't think him falling out with someone like Sancho is necessarily a bad thing. That was good that you could show a manager who still was pushing to retain control of his club. But there have been so many key performers who've fallen short, and more often to go with that, a failure to then get them back to any kind of level. So I don't think anyone who follows Manchester United closely or otherwise would be particularly surprised by this. I think it's what we all expected, and the fact that they're out currently having talks with new managers just sort of would mean that this underlines the inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, the Sun, your paper, Jack, has a similar theme, of course. Red man walking. Your colleague Neil Custis. I mean, and they reference the final nail in his coffin was the semi-final victory, ironically, over Coventry, which should have been a kind of success in the sense that they've got to another final, but the fans weren't enamoured, and everyone thought, you know, the way they kind of capitulated in that second half, even though they went on to win it, it kind of summed up where United were at.
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely incredible to watch. And I think Neil was writing after that game that pretty much was it for him, and something that we've all expected, really. I mean, it sort of almost felt like it's been coming since last summer, since the start of the season, that he's just limped through and carried on. I remember covering a game down at Bournemouth at the end of last season when Casemiro was fantastic and they all but qualified for the Champions League, and Ten Hag had shown, you know, steel and control by getting rid of Ronaldo, disciplining Marcus Rashford when he turned up late for a team meeting by dropping him when he was in the form of his life. But it's just all spiraled out of control this year. I mean, Riyadh mentioned there that he still tried to show that same strength with Jadon Sancho. But Manchester United, his bosses will look at that as a manager falling out with and effectively losing an incredibly expensive asset that has gone on to do quite well and reached the Champions League final and been pivotal in his team doing that while he's been out on loan. They'll look at a player like Sancho and the talent that he's clearly got, and think we probably need someone to get the best out of players like that and not fall out with them on a regular basis. It seems that having done so well on that side of it in his first season, he's lost a lot of control this year. He's obviously had a very tough time with injuries, and the core of the squad really from last season have either been in terrible form when you look at Casemiro and Marcus Rashford, or they've been injured like Lisandro Martinez and Luke Shaw. So he's had a really rough hand. Pep Guardiola spoke about it today, having a bit of sympathy for him, but it's something that's been coming for an incredibly long time. And I'm sure there'll probably be a bit of Erik Ten Hag that when the news finally comes on, maybe even as soon as tomorrow night or the day after, it seems like it will come quickly. There might be a bit of relief there for him.
Yeah, indeed. Just the back of the Mail, Riath, in your paper, Erik on the brink. Just this from your colleague Chris Wheeler. Just wondering about the timing here. All of this breaking kind of ahead of the FA Cup final. Will this galvanise Manchester United's players, or does it kind of further undermine Ten Hag ahead of what is going to be a pretty tough game?
I don't imagine for a second that it's easy to motivate a group of players when they all know what we all know, which is that this is coming to an end. But that being said, with Manchester United, it might even be something that counts against them. They have been capable of lifting themselves to these very improbable performances. You only have to go back to Liverpool in the FA Cup. I can't recall them being so sure of a result throughout the season as I was that Liverpool. That Liverpool would get it done, and United turn around and produce. But where they're undermined is how they've always followed it up. Every step forward under Ten Hag this season seems to have been followed by a couple backwards, or three. So that's the problem. But in terms of an isolated game, in terms of tomorrow, what's to say that they don't just find something? Would that be because of the manager in spite of him? That might be a provocative question, but they do have great quality in that side. So they have shown that they can produce great performances. It's just they're so few and far between.
OK, well, obviously it looks like the writing is on the wall for Erik Ten Hag, but the big question is who replaces him, and already talks have been underway, it would appear, with Kieran McKenna. The back of the Times, in fact, the front of the Times says McKenna waits on United offer. He was linked to other jobs, Brighton, for instance. But, Jack, this is a team that he's supported. He's been there as an assistant manager and an under-18 manager. But it seems, if you said at the beginning of the season that Kieran McKenna could realistically be a manager of Manchester United, people would have thought we were bonkers.
It's quite incredible, really, just the managerial goings-on that have happened this week and the managers that are going into or potentially going into jobs at huge clubs, having just come out of the Championship. When you look at Chelsea and potentially Enzo Maresca or Kieran McKenna there as well. He's clearly a fantastic coach, a fantastic manager. He's done incredible work with Ipswich. But the one thing that you can never know is what Manchester United will do to a person, to a manager. Huge personalities have gone in there and not be able to grasp the size of the club. The fact that every small little thing that would just be completely ignored at most other football clubs has the potential to blow up at Manchester United. It's a hard move for anyone to turn down. They're the biggest club in the country, one of the biggest clubs in the world. So anyone offered a job to take on Manchester United would really think hard about taking it and moving forward. But at such an early stage in Kieran McKenna's career, it seems like a huge gamble for someone that looks to be on such an impressive path. He obviously has worked at the club before. He knows the club. He knows the players. He knows some of the players. But it's an incredible gamble for a career that's on a very good path and could either catapult it to incredible heights or knock it down a long way.
Yeah, the eye is on a similar theme, Riath. McKenna waits to gauge United interest. This from Pete Hall. Your take on this, because you can kind of see some logic in it and that he's been there before and he's had some success. He's 38 years of age, he's young, but he's had some incredible success with double promotions with Ipswich. He could be very much the coming man, but he wasn't exactly a household name a year ago. What do you make of this link?
Well, absolutely extraordinary, to be honest. I think it totally crystallises where United are at the moment. And none of that's to say McKenna is anything less than a very exciting young talent. He looks brilliant. Back-to-back promotions. That's not been done since Nigel Adkins at Southampton, I believe. So, that is a great and rare feat. But it's Manchester United, and the fact that they're reaching into a promoted side to try and take a 38-year-old manager who is entirely untested at that level, and particularly in that kind of environment. I mean, we talk about Graham Potter and the great kind of reflex that has gone against him going to Manchester United is how would he deal with the pressure? He didn't deal with it terribly well at Chelsea. That would be the consensus. And we're talking about a manager who has never managed in the Premier League. Sure, he's going to be familiar with Manchester United, the surroundings. He's worked there as a coach, but moving from there into that level of volcano strikes me as an astonishing piece of thinking. And to go on what Jack's saying there as well, I'm really not convinced it would be a good move for him. At 38 years old, let's, if we're to take the pessimistic view and say that United's problems don't just get waved away by Dave Brailsford and Jim Ratcliffe in the kind of mess off the field. And let's not forget Dan Ashworth isn't in post yet to assist in that. Throwing a 38-year-old manager into those surroundings just feels incredibly risky for everyone, especially McKenna, who is as brilliant as his rise has been. He's still learning the trade. He's still finding his feet. He's not worked with players who cost upwards of 50 or 60 million. He's not worked with players who find themselves plastered across the media when something goes wrong off the field. The kind of scenarios that we've seen Ten Hag having to deal with this year. So I'm not convinced at all that this is the right move for any of them.
Well, we'll watch this space and it'll be a great story if it happens. Let's just move on, because we've got to remember there is a cup final still to be played with all this conjecture about the manager, Jack. Back of the Mirror says out for revenge. Ten Hag looking to end doomed reign with a win. He feels United deserved in last year's cup final, where Pep's saying no, a let-up. They've got history to be made with the double-double. I mean, can you look past anything other than Manchester City winning this one?
No, I mean, Riyadh was just talking about, Manchester United raising their standards on the odd occasion. And while they have done it at times, it is almost impossible to see anything but Manchester City getting that double-double. Manchester United have been in such disarray, lacking the basics. They've been lacking players, of course, but lacking the basics in defending. I mean, I was at their game against Crystal Palace recently, and some of that was just incredible and hilarious in equal measures to watch, especially, as long as you're not a Manchester United fan. And Manchester City have really hit their stride. I think they'll be angered by the fact they're not going for a double treble. They'll want to at least make a bit more history with that double-double, and it is so hard to see anything but them lifting the FA Cup tomorrow.
Thank you for your contribution. For now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the morning's papers, including this. Inside the Telegraph, could Roberto De Zerbi be the surprise candidate to take over as Chelsea manager? Welcome back. You're watching Back Pages tonight. Also, welcome back to Riyadh Al Samurai, Chief Sports Feature Writer at The Mail, and Jack Ross, a football reporter for The Sun. And we're going to start with The Sun, your paper, Jack. This inside, new hammer blow. If Paqueta is guilty, he will get a pathetic ban because he has money. This is kind of Isaac. Just to explain who this man is and what this story is about, give us some context to it.
Yeah, so Kynan Isaac is is a player who was playing in non-league a couple of years ago and was found guilty by the FA of being involved in something similar to what Lucas Paqueta was accused of. It was him and his friends in a sort of betting racket, almost spot fixing to benefit after he intentionally got booked in a game, and he was given a 10-year ban by the FA once those charges were upheld, and he was found guilty. And Dave Woods has done brilliantly to get an interview with him so quickly after the Paqueta news broke yesterday, and he's basically saying, if I got done on one count, Lucas Paqueta's got 4 against him, he should be banned for 40 years. And also making the argument that because Paqueta's a famous Premier League player and has a lot of money and very good lawyers, that he'll probably get off with a more lenient punishment from the FA. He cites obviously very different and less serious cases in terms of what actually happened with Ivan Toney, Harry Toppolo and Sandro Tonali, that he felt upset by the bans they were given compared to his 10-year one.
Yeah, OK. We're going to move on to the Telegraph. And De Zerbi still in the running as Chelsea work on shortlist. Obviously, Mauricio Pochettino just earlier this week parting company with Chelsea and vice versa. Riath, I mean, we've seen this before, this kind of Brighton to Chelsea move with Graham Potter. That didn't work out. De Zerbi, would that be a better fit?
Well, you're right. It's certainly a well-worn path by now. I think De Zerbi's a really interesting case in all of this. You know, he obviously that sort of first season at Brighton was fantastic. Maybe a little bit of shine has come off the halo lately. The decision to leave Brighton was certainly a mutual one. I would like to see him there. I think he's I think he's a very exciting manager. I love the way his teams play. They've got this fantastic front foot style. It comes back to the old question that we've been raising all season of how anyone who craves a certain degree of autonomy, how they would get on in the madhouse there. Now, I'd like to think we're beyond disputing the sort of madness of that particular house. We've seen a lot there. I think just as Pochettino has turned a corner and started to get a tune out of the team, very good finish to the season, only 2 defeats in the final 15 games. And then suddenly there's this decision that gets made from both parties that enough's enough. And it feels like one of those going back to square one scenarios. I think there's a 4-man shortlist that they've got over there with Maresca. They've got Thomas Frank, who I think is another very interesting candidate. I think he's done more than enough to warrant a step up. And that's being said with full respect to Brentford. And of course, Kieran McKenna's on there as well, which I'm as surprised about still as I am with the Man United situation that we discussed prior to the break. But out of those names, I think De Zerbi, certainly the way it's being positioned in that piece is the outside bet. But I think he's the really interesting name there, along with Thomas Frank.
Yeah, and of course, Jack, Chelsea this week talked about the kind of manager, the style of football that Chelsea want to be seen to be playing, the kind of possession-based and the high-energy football. It's very much the kind of De Zerbi ball, isn't it? It's what he's tried to do at Brighton.
It is, and I think, you know, like Riyadh said, if he was to get the job, I think I'd be first in line for his press conferences, because he never sort of hides behind anything. He says what is on his mind, and his take on the Chelsea ownership after a few months will be quite something, considering he managed to have a few issues with Brighton, Tony Bloom and Paul Barber at times, given the way they're run as well so professionally. I think De Zerbi and Chelsea, for us in the media, would be a match made in heaven. I don't know how well it would work out for Chelsea, but his football is thrilling to watch at times. I watched a lot of Brighton last season and early in Europe this year, and he gave them some of the best times that they've had in the club's history and some of the best football they've had as well. He also worked with Mikhailo Mudryk in Ukraine at Shakhtar Donetsk and got some fantastic things out of him there, and always talks very highly of him, tipped in to win the Ballon d'Or when he moves to the Premier League. And Chelsea will be looking to get the best out of players like that. He's obviously worked with Moises Caicedo as well. There may be some concerns from Chelsea fans that Chelsea have of maybe just rushed to the smash glass and grab someone from Brighton policy when it comes to picking a new manager. You've obviously got people like Maresca, Frank, and maybe McKenna still very much in the mix there. And it seems like from talking to people around Chelsea that there's no real clear favourite at this stage just yet. But I think if they're looking to play that sort of attractive football that's been proven at this level, then De Zerbi, or maybe, not quite as possession-based, but proven in the Premier League, Frank is another good option as well.
Yeah, OK, let's move from the managers to the players then. And in the Telegraph, it says that Saudis could get Salah and De Bruyne for free in 2025. Salah's been linked, Riyadh, for a while with Saudi, but that's the first mention I've heard of Kevin De Bruyne possibly going there.
Yeah, he's been on the sort of fringes of dispatches around this area. Now, obviously, he meets that age profile. His contract's also up in just over a year, so I believe it would be sort of 8 months from now they can enter a pre-contract arrangement. So there's, it stands to reason that the Saudis would want him, and it would boil down to a question of whether or not De Bruyne feels like he's still got more to give at the elite end of the game. I think he does. We saw his impact when he came back from injury this season after Christmas. I think he spent about 5 months out. Now, with De Bruyne on his day, I still look at him as, if not the best player in the Premier League, one of the sort of 2 or 3 who fall in that category. So, maybe a year from now, he decides that's the right time for him to go over there and sort of pocket a truckload of money. But I'd be really sad to see him go that way, because he strikes me as a guy who can comfortably do it for another 3 years at the absolute elite level. Salah's a little bit more of a long-running narrative there. We know, of course, that there was the offer last summer. From memory, we were talking about 150 million. Whether or not Liverpool come to regret that move not going through, who knows? But
yep, Riyadh, we're going to have to leave it there. Jack, Riyadh, thanks for your contributions tonight.